Hello everyone, welcome to Stash Chats Live. Tonight we will be joined by the incredible Jen of Generates. So I'm sure a lot of you will have already heard of Jen, and I'm really excited to hear about her sewing stash and her sewing tools business Generates as well. Hello Loratu. So Loratu joined us last night, which was really a fun chat. So if you missed that, make sure you catch it on YouTube or it's also on our Reels feed. Hello Natalie and Mel and everyone else who's joining. Second attempt because that's what it always does. So don't worry, Jen, we'll have you in the chat soon. Yeah, if you've got any questions, as always, just pop them in the comments box and I will keep an eye on the comments and I'll ask Jen all of your lovely questions. So I hope you're all doing really well tonight. Hope you're all up to lots of fun sewing. Has anyone been doing any festive sewing yet? I'm joining in the Gift to November challenge, so my video is going live on my Blossom Sandwich YouTube for that tomorrow. So yeah, that's quite exciting. But yeah, we'll just wait for Jen to join on the call before we get into the proper stash chat, the meat of the episode, if you will. If you do need to catch up on any of our previous episodes, on YouTube I've added a timestamp for when the guest actually joins, so I will do that for this episode as well. If you don't manage to watch all of it, you can catch it on YouTube. I've just sent you another request, Jen. It always fails on the first attempt. Hello, Jen.
Didn't think that was going to work there. Good evening.
It does this every time. I don't understand why, but it's just normal now.
Honestly, tech, it's good when it works, eh? Well, then, sorry, it's a bit better.
So how are you doing? Yeah, I'm good.
Are we good? Yeah. Okay, I'm good. It's nice to be here. Thank you for inviting me on. I'm quite liking your green wall and my pink jumper.
Yeah. Yeah, this isn't at my house, so I'm not responsible for the greenness of this wall.
Oh, I like it. I'm sitting in my lounge just now because my sewing room, which is also my office, is not fit for anyone else's eyes but mine right now.
I feel like that's what you need for a sewing space, though. Like, it's your own little haven. You don't want it to be presentable for everyone else. It's your space.
This is true, but it has just been a really hectic time with we were in Harrogate obviously last week, and then I've come back to lots of orders to process. So I've not had a chance to catch up at all, really. So it's a bit like, it's just, yeah. You know, yeah, quite exciting in there.
Natalie says, have you recovered from Harrogate yet?
I almost, you know, Harrogate's such a nice event because it's such a nice place to visit, and you know what it's like, that the kind of there's a really strong community among the exhibitors as well, and so I think Harrogate, I had one night where we weren't out for dinner and drinks, which is quite intense. So yeah, I'm recovering, I should say. I'm recovering, but it's taking a while.
You want to make the most of it while everyone's there, though, don't you?
Oh, totally. Yeah, totally. It's just such a laugh. You know, we have such a laugh, and it's really nice seeing other people from the B, and yeah, it's just really good fun. So
awesome. Melanie said that she loves her Generates Hemmer.
Oh, thank you, honey. That's very kind. Thank you. I appreciate that.
So, do you want to kick us off by telling us about your sewing journey, when you learned to sew?
Crikey, I don't remember learning to sew. Genuinely, I have no recollection of being taught. So I think I probably hung on my grand's skirts and my mum's skirts when they were sewing, and, like, you know, pestered them. Show me that, let me have a shot. My gran had an old treadle, Singer treadle, which I can remember quite well. And so sewing was just part of existence, really. And obviously in my grand's generation it was a necessity, because that's the only way really that you could you know, have your clothes, really. And then my mum says that when she was growing up, you know, there's a great school photo of her wearing entirely handmade uniform right down to the knitted socks, And she said that he just wanted to have shop bought. You know, he didn't want this handmade malarkey. That was like second best. So there was a bit of a kind of movement then against it. And I think probably, you know, it's a luxury. I think for most of us, it's a bit of a luxury that we choose to sew, because obviously we could go and get cheap clothes if we wanted to, or maybe, you know, maybe we'd be lucky enough to get more expensive clothes. But to make your own is a choice. It's a lifestyle choice now, isn't it?
It's having
Which is lovely. Yeah, and having the ability to make what you want to wear is so liberating. And I find that the older I get, the more I find that, because as you get older, the clothes which will fit you in shops become fewer and fewer. And because obviously a lot of shops use blocks for younger women. And so it's really liberating not to have to wear what high street shops think I should at my age. I don't really want to act my age.
Yeah.
So, you know.
When you're like, see things that are age appropriate and you're like, this isn't me, I'm not wearing this.
Yeah, exactly. So I like the only high street shop that I ever really look in is COS. And I'd also go into Arcade if we had one up here, but we don't. But I quite like COS for being quite relevant across the generations. So I can go in with my daughter and I can go in with my mum, and we'll all see things that we like. And I like the styling of that. But yeah, it's an interesting one. It's a luxury to be able to sew, I think. It's a really lucky thing. It is a superpower.
Yes, definitely. So when did you like really get into sewing then? Or were you just always in your own wardrobe?
Always. Yeah, so I remember for my 14th, I think it was my birthday, and I was given my own machine. So by that point, I was kind of sewing enough and probably annoying my mum and my gran enough that I got my own machine. And it was a Toyota. I've still got it. It weighs a ton. I mean, it's solid metal. And actually, what was quite funny, when we did the sewing bee, our vintage week was, it was 70s. And although my machine dated from, well, I was 14 in 1984. So although my machine was from the 80s, actually one of the machines, and my friend Ben got it, was actually the same as mine, just the kind of previous colourway. And I was chatting to the producer team afterwards, and it was actually one of the sewing producers, it was actually his machine. And I've got the same one. And he said, oh, it's fabulous. And he was telling me all about the history of it and why it's such a great machine. And it would have been such a gift to me if I'd been given that machine on that challenge, because I know it backwards. I know it inside out, literally. So, and yeah, I wish I'd got it actually. That'd have been really funny. But yeah.
Really showed his confidence in like the sturdiness of that machine, because I feel like I'd be nervous that somebody would like break my machine when they're like rushing to finish a project at a time limit, but they're like, oh no, old Toyota, that's unbreakable, that is.
Oh yeah, I mean they really are unbreakable. You know, they're just workhorses. And I think these old mechanical machines as well, there's nothing to go wrong in them really. You know, they're kind of, as long as you keep them oiled and you look after them a wee bit, they're just absolutely fantastic. Of course you've got, you know, I think I had a 4-step buttonhole that I could do on it, and that was pretty advanced. And it did do zigzag, so I could do stretch. But yeah, it's pretty basic. Do you know, I still haul it out sometimes. So my Juki's getting serviced just now, and I do have several machines. But I think the Toyota might get a wee shot on my sewing desk. Just a little visit to my Toyota. So I'll take a photo and post it if I do.
Yeah, you've got to revisit those core memories every now and again.
Yeah. Absolutely. I remember as well when I was given that machine, we've got a photo of, I was so excited to get my own machine. And so my big sister was 5 years older than me. So by that point, she must have been 18 and a half. And, you know, into punk rock and all the rest of it. And we've got a great photo of me kind of opening up this machine with complete glee, just absolute joy on my face. And my big sister's just sitting there looking at me like, absolutely, what are you doing? What are you thinking? So, yeah, horses for courses, eh?
Amazing. Because you're also a keen knitter as well, aren't you?
Yeah, I don't remember learning to knit either. So I think again it's just something that's always been done. And I did have quite an interesting experience with my knitting though, because maybe about 20 years ago, one of my American cousins came to visit, and she had been taught to knit by her German granny, so her other granny from the other side of the family from me. And she was taught to knit continental, where you hold the yarn in your left hand. And so I was like, wow, show me this. And I taught myself, and on the back of that, I was really interested in the kind of history of that and why we don't knit continental in this country. And I kind of taught myself to knit continental, and now I'm quite an evangelical continental knitter. I teach it usually at the yarn fests. And I really like being able to do both, because then when you do colour work, you can hold a yarn in each hand and it looks like you're doing magic. But yeah, so I did kind of, I think I've probably actively extended my knitting knowledge more than my sewing knowledge, to tell you the truth. My sewing knowledge has kind of grown by mostly trial and error, whereas my knitting knowledge, I've actively sought out different techniques and kind of been quite interested in the history of knitting. And these things are lovely of it because, generally, if you think about it, generally we've been taught by our mothers and our grandmothers through the ages. And so, the way that I knit and the fact that I sew gives me a direct link to my gran. And she was probably taught by her gran, and she was taught by her gran. And it gives you this kind of really strong path back through your female ancestry, which I think is a lovely thing. So it's something to cherish.
Definitely. And it's like a way to keep like those skills alive, like even if their work wasn't valued like back in the past, it's still like carrying on, like the legacy's still there.
Yeah, absolutely. That's right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and I think that's probably right. I think we're lucky because certainly kind of in my sewing lifetime, if you like, it's become much more valued. Or maybe it's just that I now have more people who value it the same way as I do. But certainly, I remember I made a dress to wear to my graduation ball, for example, when I finished uni, and I didn't tell anyone I'd made it. Whereas now I'd be like, yeah, I made this.
Yeah, I think it's definitely like having a resurgence sewing. Like I think, with the sewing bee and then also the pandemic with people having a lot more time and like people realizing how bad fast fashion is as well. I think it's, people are like, well, maybe I'll get into ethical fashion, but then it's so expensive. So then you're like, okay, well, even though it does cost more to make my own clothes, it still costs less than buying ethical. So yeah.
Yeah, that's right. But then it's interesting. I think that's where like Stash Hub's really useful because I think as well we are, I'm quite guilty of buying fabrics that I like without necessarily having a firm plan for them. And then, talking about the kind of environmental aspect of it is I have a responsibility to buy carefully and to use what I've bought, I think, and to use as much as I can of what I've bought. And I do a lot of sewing with found fabrics or true waste as well. But it's really good to kind of just be aware of what is in your stash and what you can pick up for a project.
Yeah.
I had a real kind of dilemma about stash, actually, about how much stash fabric I've got, because my yarn stash is ridiculous because you use it so slowly. I generally don't buy yarn. I shop my stash, and my sewing stash, my fabric stash is big, and it's a lot of it. Some of it is found fabric, so it's things I've picked up in charity shops, or it's waste. I sew quite a lot with waste from a local cashmere mill. So when you get the chance to get that kind of fabric, you take it basically. And then my rule is I'm only allowed to buy fabric if I really, really, really love it. It has to be really special, or it has to be for an immediate project, one or other. But I was beating myself up about it a wee bit. Maybe about a year ago, I was thinking, this is ridiculous, it's really wasteful. And then I realised, I was reorganising it one day, and I realised that actually for me, I find it quite inspirational because projects sometimes come to me because I want to make a pattern or a garment, but other times it's because I see a fabric or something in my sewing room and I think, oh, I could do that with it. So I get inspiration both ways. And actually having a stash for me does inspire me, and it does give me that kind of just lets me kind of turn ideas over in my head.
Yeah.
So I stopped beating myself up about it when I thought that.
Yeah.
That's my excuse anyway.
Yeah. We're very like pro stash here at Stash Hub, like, and then the whole idea of doing these stash chats, like, I don't want people to feel like bad about their stash, because like most people have got a fair amount of stash, and it's there for you when you need it, and to know what you've got as well, it means that inspiration is more readily available for you.
Yeah, I think that's vital. I think you do need to know what you've got, because if you don't, then that's when it sits in the cupboard unused and unloved. And then maybe you realise you've got it and you think, oh, that would have been great for that project, but you've missed it. You've missed that chance. I have used some fabrics in the past. I've got a friend up north. It's a friend of my wee sister's who has a vintage shop, and she quite often gets fabric in. And I've bought fabric from her before, which you don't know what it is, of course. And quite often it's a narrow loom weave. So it's now somebody told me that means it dates before, I think, a date in the 1960s. This particular, very narrow weave. And but one of the pieces I bought from her, I made it into a dress, and it was a silk crepe. It's beautiful fabric, and I made it into a dress. And the next time I was up, this girl who owns the shop was having a Christmas party in the shop, so she invited me along with my sister, and I wore the dress, and the girl and her mum were both there, and her mum got really emotional because the fabric had actually come from her granny's attic.
Oh,
from
wow.
the attic, so the mum's mum, So it was her stash, it was somebody else's stash. And I was really pleased that I'd made it up and worn it. And it kind of finally found its light of day, and wasn't still sitting festering somewhere.
Yeah, oh, that's really nice that they were able to see it. We've got loads of love hearts pouring in for that story. Mm-hmm. Natalie said, have you got a favourite fabric in your stash?
Do you know? No, I don't. I mean, I've got some that I'm eyeing up just now. I've got a couple of pieces of quilted, the kind of quilted jacquard, the kind of Merchant and Mills. I've got a bit from Merchant and Mills and a bit from somewhere else. And I am eyeing them up. I'm in the middle of making another coat, because, I've got a bit of a coat addiction. And once I finish that, I've got a couple of projects. I've got a couple of things that I've fallen out of love with, and I do need to de-stash a wee bit just to clear out, or seriously think about what I could do with them. Because I've bought them for a reason. I've bought them thinking I really like this and I could see something with it, but I'm not seeing that just now. But then it might come back, eh? So
like the vintage fabric as well, like if you were able to de-stash it and then see it on someone else like made up, you'd be like, oh, I'm so glad I de-stashed that fabric, like it's not here blocking up my inspiration, it's out there as something amazing.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's a valuable thing too, to have somebody else kind of see the good in it, if you like, or kind of enjoy it. It's about it being enjoyed, really, isn't it? It's a funny thing, because when you sew, you separate out the fabric from the garment, whereas if you're buying ready to wear, you look at the finished item and you maybe, you're distracted by the garment from the fabric quite often. Whereas when we're buying fabric, it's all about, how does this feel? What's it made of? All the rest. And then you make it into an item of clothing. So I like the fact that we kind of pay attention to the fabric, and it does get enjoyed.
I mean, when I first started sewing, I didn't even know like how ignorant I was about fabric. Like, they'd be like, oh yeah, I've got that one t-shirt that's really soft and nice. And like, it was a viscose jersey, but I'd never like looked at the label. I didn't know what that meant. So like to kind of build that knowledge, and then even if you don't make all of your clothes, at least you know what you like, and have as well.
That's so true, and certainly, if I go shopping with my daughter, and I'm always looking at the labels, I'm always like checking, what's this made of, and she does get a bit tired of me doing it. But I'm like, Kirsty, it's polyester. It just means it's plastic. It's actually plastic. So oh, Mum. You can make something then.
Yeah, I think it's quite good though, sometimes going into the shops and you look around and you're like, oh, I could make that, oh, too much polyester. You're like, yeah, I'm onto a good thing here with my sewing hobby.
Yeah, absolutely. It's we are onto a good thing. It really is, and it's lovely going to an event like Harrogate or any of the sewing shows where you're kind of among your people, and everyone gets it, and it's such a laugh, because you do end up doing that thing where, where you see somebody wearing something and you say, oh, that's nice, and you kind of get them to turn around so you can have a look at the back, and you kind of talk about the construction and so on, and you can do that there. Everyone's in the same boat, so everyone's quite happy to kind of to do that. I did try it once. I forget, Glasgow's a very chatty city, and there's a lot of talk among strangers goes on in shops and so on. So this wasn't a problem. But I was in the bathrooms in John Lewis once, and this woman was washing her hands, and she had this amazing coat, and I said, "Oh, I really like your coat. Thanks very much," she said. And then I started really examining it, and I'm like, "Oh, it's a really interesting construction." And she was like, "Yes." So, yes, it's nice when you're somewhere like Harrogate and you can you have free reign.
Jen said you did a good examination of her jumpsuit.
I did. Yeah, we made her untie it.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So your business Generate is all about like making useful tools. So when you were like learning to sew or in your sewing practice, did you have like a particular tool that you got where you were like, wow, this is like a game changer, I'm really into the tools now?
Do you know, not really, apart from a quick unpick. But no, it started because I couldn't find the tools that I wanted. So the first thing I had in my head for years and years and years was my ruler. I've got one here. I've brought one through. So that ruler. And the thing about that is it starts at 0 there and there. And that's what I couldn't find. And I thought that would be really useful because then I wouldn't have to think too hard about how I was placing it down. And it's quite a hard thing to articulate why that ruler is useful. But it was a kind of lucky coincidence. So I had this idea in my head for years and years and years, right? And it just sat there, and I thought I must try and make one out. I occasionally, I kind of fairly regularly looked and really tried to find this ruler, and I could never find it. And then I did the sewing bee. And when we finished filming, at that point, I was doing silversmithing at Glasgow College, just on a kind of, leisure class basis. But I went back to my silversmithing, and I'm like, oh, I don't want to do jewellery. It's all about sewing. I have to sew. And my teacher was like, well, make something for your sewing. So I was already pretty proficient on the design programs from a previous job. And I made my ruler, and I thought, well, this is as good as I thought it was going to be. It was really it met my expectations in terms of being useful. So at the same time, I was teaching knitting in a shop in Glasgow in the Yarn Cake, and one of the women who was coming to my class got chatting to her, young woman, and I said, oh, so what do you do? And she said, I've just moved back to Glasgow with my husband. We've got a laser cutting business. And I'm like, well, what are the chances? So she and I got together, and I did various prototypes and kind of tweaked the design, and then I made 100 and I put them on Instagram, and this would be during lockdown. This was summer of 2020. And I put them on Instagram, kind of felt very vulnerable doing it, actually, because I'm saying, oh, here's something that I've designed that I think is really useful. And what do you think, my people? What, my tribe, what do you think? So my community, I guess. And sold them in half an hour. And I thought, okay, that's quite interesting. So then that kind of became a business. And then a year later, I brought out my seam circles, which I designed because I was using quite a lot of fibre mood and border patterns, and I wanted a way of doing the seam allowance really quickly, because that's the most boring part, like when you've got a new pattern, you're like, yeah, I want to do this new pattern, and you trace it off, and that's great, and then you've got to do the seam allowance before you can actually cut it out. So I wanted to be doing that quickly. So then I brought the seam circles out a year later, and they became an immediate bestseller for me. And then a year later, again, the hemmer, which is my other kind of big product in terms of sales, completely born out of frustration from other hemmers. I was thinking the biggest problem for me was that the hemmers wouldn't let the steam go through. So they would either bounce it back at you, or they would just absorb the steam. So I thought, this is ridiculous. Why on earth aren't they made out of silicone with holes in it? And then I'm like, okay, I'll make one out of silicone with holes in it. And then, kind of the design kind of develops from that point. But that was literally my starting point, was kind of frustration. I'd ordered I tried various hemmers, and I'd ordered the Dritz one, which is metal, and I got it from the States. It was quite expensive to get it sent over. And as soon as it arrived, I thought, what the heck was I thinking buying a hemmer, a thing that I use with my iron, in metal? Because of course, it just heats up. And then actually I damaged it with the iron, but then also I ran over it with my sewing room chair. So I'd really killed it. And it was that was my final kind of I need to do something about this. So everything I do is kind of born out of what I want for
Yeah.
myself as a sewer. And then I think a lot of people might like that too. And yeah, the rulers and the seam circles and the hemmers are my three kind of big products. And then the pattern tracker's my one this year. So I've done one a year basically. I've had kind of one big idea a year, plus various kind of side ideas and offshoots. But the pattern tracker I did for my Fairell knitting, so I can move it up my knitting chart. But then I'm selling them to people who do cross stitch and beadwork, and actually I've been using it on my knitting pattern. I just made a hat for actually for my production partners. They're about to have their second baby, literally next weekend. So I'm very excited, and I knitted a wee hat for the baby. And I was using the pattern tracker just on my written pattern. I'm like, this is really fitting a bill. So that's been really popular as well. So yeah, one a year. So pressure's on for next year, eh?
I have an amazing idea soon.
Yeah.
Lorati said that those metal hemmers get very hot and then they bend, and she much prefers a Generate hemmer.
That's my girl. Yeah, no, that's, I mean, I can't, when it arrived, I thought, what was I thinking ordering this? Like, really? Like, seriously? Who makes a hammer out of metal? So, yeah.
You're going to keep moving it as well, and then you're going to have to get your oven mitt out. It seems crazy.
Yeah, exactly. And the silicone doesn't heat up that much, so it's kind of, silicone's exactly the right product for it. So, yeah, I was really pleased to have the idea. And it's also, it's also why I always feel a wee bit arsey, basically, because I call on my products that generates whatever it is. But the reason I do that, there's actually a really good reason for doing it, and that's because it defines my ownership of it, of the idea, because it's hard, sure, I protect my ideas in the UK, but I'm just one person. If somebody rips me off in America, what am I going to do about that? How can I battle that legally? I can't, really, not without having pots of cash behind me. And so I was really lucky. I used to be a lawyer, and I have lots of lawyer friends, and I got advice from the intellectual property team in a very, very big company in Scotland, who basically have a huge team of lawyers who constantly battle people trying to rip them off. And that was their advice. They're like, yeah, do this and this to protect yourself, but the most important thing is always refer to things with your name. And so that's why, and it does feel a bit like, oh, I've smoked myself, it generates hammer, generates seam circles, but that's why I do it. So yeah,
like, when people are like, yeah, that seam thingy, it's like, the Generate seam thing, then they'll be able to find it. And it also, like, people who know you, but they're not necessarily the products. Yeah. Hello, Dr. Thanks for joining. So could you pick a favourite from your line of products if you had to pick one?
Oh, crikey. No, I couldn't. I really couldn't. I mean, I genuinely use them all a lot. I use the hammer all the time. Recently I discovered, this is the hammer here, and recently I discovered two useful new things about it that I told a few people at Harrogate. Obviously it's for turning a hem, but then I realised as well, when you've got a wee bit of interfacing sticking out from your fabric and you iron it to your ironing board cover by mistake, and I think everybody who sews has got lots of strips of kind of furry, the ghost of interfacing on their ironing board cover. Well, if you slap the hammer underneath the interfacing, it doesn't stick. So, and then the other one that I realised, I'd unpicked something and I had millions of little bits of thread all over I used a big felt mat, and they were covering this felt mat. And I realised as well that if I roll the hammer up, I'll just take this off here. So if I kind of do this, it makes a really good thread grabber. So yeah, so genuinely I use my own tools a lot, and it would be really hard for me to pick a favourite. I mean, I guess I think probably the ruler and the hammer and the seam circles are my three biggest sellers, so I kind of like them from that point of view as well. It feels like I've contributed something that other people find useful, which is a really nice thing.
Yeah, well, if you can't think of any ideas for next year, you can just keep rolling with the silicone theme and do like a big silicone mat that's your pressing mat that's white clean or something.
Yeah, well, actually, I mean, do you know that that's something. Joking aside, one of the things, because I also like using things that maybe aren't meant to be used in a sewing room, but quite often you can find a really good use for them. So, for example, I got some cheap silicone oven liners. You know, the kind of crinkly ones. They're kind of like they're not like the silicone I make this from. It's just like I got them from. I think I actually got them on Amazon, like in 10 for £5 or something, and they're just kind of oven liners, and they are really great for interfacing because you can actually iron interfacing on them. If you're like me and you're interfacing scraps going to box in the cupboard and they get really crushed, you can literally iron your interfacing on them with the glue side down, and the glue will stay on the interfacing and doesn't come off into the silicone. So that's a good trick. And the other thing you can do with them, I got one sheet and I cut a square out the middle of it that was the size of my sewing machine plate. Okay, and the rest of that sheet covers the bed of my sewing machine from the edge right into the throat. And I just put a bit of masking tape front and back, and I've got an entirely non-stick sewing machine. And that's awesome. See if you're doing anything that, if it's either because it's quite grippy, it's something like maybe you're sewing with leather or something like that, or you're sewing with silk or something really slippy that you just don't want to snag anywhere. Yeah, I use that quite a lot. And literally, they're 50p silicone sheets that you get in Lakeland plastic or whatever in the supermarket. So yeah, I do like discovering ways of using things, cheats, hacks, hog hacks.
Yeah, lots of good hack. They're very inventive.
Yeah, yeah. I never knew I was yeah. I, I like to tell people I'm an inventor now, but that sounds a bit grand, doesn't it?
I think it's great. I think, yeah, when people are like, oh, what do you do? Oh, I'm an inventor. And then you're like, what have you made? And they're like, they don't sew and they just don't understand. And you're like, it's really like I've only tried to use one of the fiber mood patterns from the magazine, and I like traced it out, and then I cut it out, and then I realised I had to add the seam allowance, and I was like, absolutely not. Like, I've already cut it out, and so it's still just like covered. I'm like, one day I'll make this pattern.
I think it's such a common thing. It's such a common mistake to make with them. And it's as soon as you've done it once, you'll never do it again. But yeah, I think most people have done that once. I'll give you a good trick with the fibre mood patterns, though, or Burda, any of those ones where you're tracing off from the pattern spaghetti and you've got lots of intersecting pattern lines. And then you've got to try and figure out, trace that off onto your tracing paper. And I had a bit of an epiphany with that a couple of years ago. And I got a friction pen, a dark friction pen. And I highlighted the particular line I wanted to trace on the Burda sheet. And then I put my tracing paper on top, and I could see it more easily because I'd highlighted this line. So I traced it off, and then I ironed the friction pen off the Burda sheet. So you're back to clean to start again. And that is a game changer for me because it makes it so much quicker to trace these patterns. And I am still waiting for my lifetime subscription from both Burda and Fibermood for that one. I did that as a hog hack on Instagram, and it almost immediately started getting quoted back at me. Like, have you heard about this great idea? I'm like, yes, it's mine.
I mean, that's how you know that it's been a popular tip that has come all the way back around to you.
Absolutely, how quickly it comes back to you as well. So yeah, but yeah, it's a good tip. That it makes it so much easier. I usually only really highlight the bits where I know I'm going to struggle to see across the intersections. Where it's going to be difficult to trace it off. So yeah, but it is a good trick.
Yeah, the worst parts are where like all the lines like converge together, and you're trying to see like where your size is like sneaking out from the big bundle.
Exactly, and there's a pattern marking in that bit as well.
Yeah,
inevitably. So you're
right.
you're thinking, okay, which one is it?
Like right next to each other, you just have to hope for the best.
Yeah, somebody else told me that she has an old glass dining table, and they kept it because she can put a light underneath it.
That's genius.
And create a light box. And I was like, that was a good idea. So yeah. That was also a really nifty idea, I thought.
I've got a glass coffee table. Maybe I can try it on that.
Yeah, you can maybe try it. Yeah, but we were to try actually. Yeah.
Everyone who's watching, you can feel free to drop your questions for Jen in the chat as well. So shall we just chat a little bit about the sewing bee. I'm sure you're probably fed up of talking about it all the time, but everyone loves to hear about the bee. So what encouraged you to apply to the bee originally?
Oh, moment of madness. Moment of madness. I never thought. The thing is, you kind of, I saw a flyer in one of the fabric shops in Glasgow, and the actual application is quite interesting. And I thought, it kind of makes you think about your sewing history and why you sew and what you sew and, how you learn to sew and all that jazz. And so I was sitting, I'd seen this flyer, and I was sitting one night and I'm like, oh, I'll have a look at that on my phone. And then I got quite into this questionnaire, and that was actually quite interesting. So I filled it all in. I'll just send that in. It'll never go anywhere. And at every stage they say, thousands of applications. If we don't get back to you, then it's a no. And I'm like, that's fine. And I'll never hear anything back. And then you do. And then at each stage you think, well, I won't hear any more from them. And literally, genuinely. And it was only when, I've said this before, but it's only when I got a call saying, can you come down for a psychiatric evaluation? I was like, oh heck, this actually looks like it might happen. And at that point I'm thinking, oh my God, I don't want to be on telly. This is kind of so not me. But then also I thought, when they asked me to go on, I thought, well, I'm not going to turn it down, because at the very, very least, it's going to be a really fascinating thing to see. As a programme I really enjoy, and I'll get to see behind the scenes. Yeah. So, at that point, even if you go out in week one, it's still a fascinating experience to have, and not an experience not many people get to have. So, you have to kind of take your opportunities, don't you? So it was a moment of madness, really.
So did you watch back the series that you were on?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, we all watched it at a time, and that was actually the most difficult thing for me, was that period after filming it and before it comes out, when they're editing it. And they take a huge amount of footage. There's 6 cameras on all the time, and each episode takes 2 full days to film. So the number of hours of footage they have, which they then condense down into maybe about 40 minutes of footage from the sewing room, when you think about it, with all the kind of other bits and pieces they put in. And you really, at that point, you have no idea how you're going to come across, how you might be edited. There's a lot, there's a lot to kind of, well, for me, there was a lot to worry about actually at that point. I have no idea what this is going to be like. I don't really want to see myself on telly, and I think I was really lucky, because I think that I was fairly true. When people meet me, I think I am what they expect me to be. So I think that the way that I came across was pretty accurate, which I think that is actually quite lucky, to an extent. I'm not sure that folk on The Apprentice would be able to say that, for example, because there's a different agenda with that, isn't there? Do you know what I mean? Like other programmes, there's a different agenda about how they want to kind of present the programme, or kind of increase the sense of competition. I mean, genuinely, in our series, there was absolutely no sense of competition whatsoever. It was very we were all helping each other, and that came across, I think. So yeah, it was a very, very interesting experience.
And Natalie agrees that you are what she expected, getting to meet you in person.
Well, the psychiatrist woman, she did say to me, oh, how do you think you'll be on television? And I said, well, I don't think I can do anything other than be myself, because I might plan to have, my television smile, or whatever it is. I might plan to kind of be a certain way, but I think as soon as you're under pressure, you're going to be pretty honest about yourself. And I swore like a trooper. I was very Glaswegian. I'm not actually Glaswegian, but I tell you, I adopted it for the programme, because under stress you just kind of revert. so yeah, they could have had me with lots of beeps.
They like to keep the show quite wholesome, though, don't they? So probably if the whole thing had been bleeped out, they would have been like,
yeah, absolutely. And actually, it was partly deliberate, because before we started filming, not long before, I heard an interview with a guy who did Bake Off years ago. It was a young Scottish guy who did really well in Bake Off, and he used to wear Fair Isle jumpers. You might remember him. Anyway, I think he got through to the final, and he said in this interview that they had realised that if they swore, then they couldn't use the footage. So whenever anything was going wrong, they were like taking their burnt buns out the oven or whatever, and they were going and swearing away so that they couldn't use this footage. So the first time that we all met together as a group of sewers, which was just the night before we started filming, actually, and I told the others this. I said, "Oh, by the way, I heard this interview, and it's the same production company." I said, "I heard this interview with this James guy, and this is what he said." so we were all adopting that. So I'm sure the producers were cursing me.
Did you find like when you were actually doing the project though, you were like quite focused on the actual sewing and not like noticing the cameras as much?
Oh yeah, I mean things happened that I was just unaware of. For example, Joe's mum and sister came in to kind of have a look at the studio and all the rest because it was his first series, and somebody said, "Oh, did you say hello to Joe's mum and sister?" And I'm like, "No." I was completely oblivious that they'd been in. So, and you also do that thing where you're very much in the zone and you're very focused on what you're doing, and then one of the storyline producers pops up in front of your desk and asks you a question, and you kind of you do this, and you have to learn. And it's amazing how quickly you learn to do this, but you have to answer everything in complete sentences, so they don't need to put in their question. So you wouldn't, like, you might say to me, "Oh, what are you sewing now?" And I wouldn't just say a sleeve. I would say, "At the moment, I'm sewing a sleeve." So you kind of learn to do that fairly quickly. But yeah, there's a lot of distractions that they kind of foist on you. We had one incident where my friend Janet on the show had got frustrated about something, and she had like that moment of kind of just like greeting and frustration. That way when you kind of just get wound up about something. And they'd missed this. And one of the storyline producers popped up in front of her desk and he said, Janet, you were just having a little cry and we missed it. Could you do it again?"
Oh no! I was just about to ask, do they retake any bits?
Well, they try, but they failed. No, they don't. They generally don't, apart from they'll get Patrick and Esme to repeat things if there's been a motorbike going past outside or something like that. But no, they don't kind of retake anything that we do. Or they didn't, in my experience, anyway, in our series.
So much that it doesn't really matter if they're like, "Oh, we've been off that clip, that's fine."
Yeah, that's right. And they're amazing. I mean, it's such a skill. The cameramen were all amazing at really, avoiding. It's incredible you don't see them, because there's so many. I mean, there's 6 cameras, and it always amazes me that they managed to all get footage without the other cameras being visible, or wires, or, And they kind of, I remember at one point in one of the transformation challenges and deciding that I wanted more stuff from the haberdashery at the very last minute. And it was like that parkour scene in James Bond, it was all at a very kind of low level. But, it was like you had to jump over this wire and underneath that boom. And it was really good fun, actually. And the crew were all really nice.
Of the 3 challenges, like the pattern challenge, the transformation and the made to measure, what was your favourite one to do?
Probably the transformation. I really enjoyed the transformation just because it's very liberating to be so restricted in time and you just have to kind of get an idea and go with it. And I really like the pattern challenge as well because I don't often follow patterns that carefully, to tell you the truth. I'm a bit more off-piste usually, so it's quite nice to kind of have to just kind of follow a pattern. And in that context, you second guess everything as well. So you're constantly at home you might think, "Oh, I wouldn't do it that way, I'm going to do it this way." But when you're there, you're like, it says I need to do it that way, I need to do it that way. So you kind of, you if someone said to you, "What's your name?" you'd be like, "It's Jen." "Yes, it is Jen. It is Jen. It's Jen." So you kind of
get that
lose that.
Like when you're in exam, was it that sort of feeling when you're just like, "Gotta go now"?
Yeah, it was a wee bit actually. I mean, it's really intense. And at no point in any challenge, at any point in our whole series, did anybody have time to sit and have a cup of tea or kind of, they had a kind of a young guy who was kind of there to make sure we all had what we needed and so on. And he would pop up in front of your desk every now and then and just say, "Drink water."
Oh,
You're like, oh, yeah.
he was like, I've got to keep sewing. Hold my bottle.
Yeah, practically. So,
Amazing. So
yeah.
I've spoken this week to some of the recent bees who are on this series, and they've still got all of their stuff that they made on the bee, or most of it. So have you kept what you've made on the bee?
Yeah, I have. I kept it all, partly for nostalgia, really. And sometimes I do talks, and people, especially there's a couple of outfits that I do that people tend to remember when I bring them out. They're like, "Oh, I remember you sewing that." There is one in the semi-final. We had to sew dhoti pants, which are really wide-legged pleated trousers. And it's a huge amount of fabric. I think we had to get something like 3.5 meters of fabric to make these things. And the Esme's like, oh, here's the pattern. I'm not going to tell you what fabric to use, but it has to be appropriate. And so I'm thinking, well, it's either cotton or silk because it's Indian. They're Indian trousers. And the other three all went and got cotton, looking at these pleats very sensibly. And I'm thinking, I get this garment back, and it's got 3.5 meters of fabric. So I went and got Liberty Silk.
Nice. That's very funny.
I'm like, so you can take the girl out of 5, but you can't really take 5 out of the girl.
Get your money first.
Yeah, I've not cut them up yet, but I will. I might one day, but yeah. So that was fine. I picked silk, but I came top in that pattern challenge, so it paid off.
Yeah, definitely. That's a great play.
Yeah.
How did you find using the haberdashery, like compared to your own stash?
Oh, it was fab. I mean, it's so fab just having, I would love to have that wall of thread, for example. Just so, yeah, really good. Yeah, it was like being a child in a sweetie shop. I think for all of us, we were all like, oh, let's get in here. So yeah, the haberdashery is, I think, a joy. And they would kind of group fabrics together, but they'd also have random things. So especially where, like, say for example, like they had to do swimsuits, so they had like lots of different swimwear fabrics. But then, they'd maybe have a row, something like, rack that wasn't appropriate, but then in there they'd have maybe one thing that was. So they were it was good to hunt. It was good to hunt him as well. But yeah, oh, that'd be a nice room to have in your house, wouldn't it?
Emma said, did you get to shop the haberdashery at the end with all the leftover fabrics?
Do you know, well, actually, not so much, but what they did do at the wrap party was they did have lots of pieces, lots of remnants, the kind of, not so the fabrics which had been cut but then not used or whatever, so not the rolls that you saw in the haberdashery, but kind of more remnants than that. And I totally missed it. So I came back. I don't know what I'd been doing. I'd been out gassing with somebody, or I don't know. And we came back in, and one of the producers said, "Oh, you've missed the remnants. You've missed the remnants." And there'd been this kind of big. The other thing they did do, though, which I did get a couple of nice things, was and it was great actually. They towards the end of filming, they had a table with lots of really sizable remnants on them, and you could buy them for a donation to, I think it was to MND charity. So it was that was a nice thing to do. I was really happy to kind of take some and donate to that. So yeah, but I don't know what I was doing. I was away having a gin and tonic with somebody or something. Totally missed the best bit of the wrap party.
You're too busy enjoying it as an actual party instead of a fabric shop.
Yeah. Although Esme outlasted me at that party. She was still dancing when I left. So
Esme seems like quite a party animal, to be fair.
have you read her book? Her book's brilliant. I really enjoyed it, and I wish I'd known that about her before I met her. It was nice. I got to interview her. So she and Serena both had a book coming out about the same time, under the same publishing umbrella. So it wasn't the same publisher, but it was the same kind of group or whatever. And so they did an event in Edinburgh, a kind of book event, and the person who'd been meant to interview them, that had fallen through. So they asked if I would interview them. So that was really nice, because I know Serena from Jamie B and both being Scottish and so on. And Esme came up and well, so we had a really nice evening actually. We got to play. We played a game with Esme because my mum is tiny. My mum's only like 5 foot and a bit, I think. And Esme, of course, is tiny. So my mum had come down for this evening. And so afterwards, I'm like, right, Esme, we need to play a game. Who is taller? You or my mum? I think my mum was. I think my mum was like about that much taller than Esme.
And the bit that's pushed her over the edge.
Yeah, yeah. And another thing of that night that it was quite good was Patrick's mum was there because she lives in Edinburgh, and so she came up and introduced herself. So that was really nice to meet her as well. So yeah, it was a nice night actually. But Esme's a laugh. She's a real hoot. Such an interesting person.
Yeah, definitely. If anyone's not read her book, I would recommend it. She's got
it's called
wild
Behind the Scenes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's well worth reading. Yeah, put it on your Christmas list if you've not read it because it's really worth reading.
I listened to the audio book, which Esme reads herself as well, which is really good. So you can do some sewing at the same time.
That's a good idea. Yeah, I really like that with audiobooks when people read their own books. Yeah, that's a really good idea. I kind of regret I didn't do that actually.
Do you have anything else you want to show us or talk to us about, Jen?
No, I mean, I should be doing a kind of show and tell with all my tools, shouldn't I? And I've got more things here, but I'm not very kind of good salesperson, I don't think, because I don't kind of focus on that. It's the same with Instagram. I kind of, you know what it's like. You see endless posts advising you how to do better on Instagram, don't you? If you have a business in particular, I think you get these endless posts saying, oh, you should do this and you should do that, and you'll drive engagement, and you'll do this and you'll get these followers. And I kind of think, I would rather be true to myself and just kind of do it my way and be authentic, and then what happens. It's like, it's a bit like they always say, oh, you need to use the music that's trending. And I think, no, I'll use music that I like, whether it's interesting or, what I mean? So yes, I do have lots of things, but my website's easy. It's jenhogg.co.uk. There you go. That's my sales pitch.
The way you've designed your products to sort of fix a sewing irritation, they kind of sell themselves. Like, do you have a really horrible metal hem presser that is burned you every time you've used it? All right, get a hot hemmer then. Yeah. I think it's I think people will find your products useful, and I think the way that you post more like tutorial and informative content as well is like a value add to the community. So I think that's really important too.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and it's been an interesting time this year. I've had quite a few quite exciting things happen. Like Threads magazine got in touch a couple of months ago and they said, can we feature you? We love your scene circles. Can we feature them in Threads magazine gift guide, winter gift guide? I'm like, yes. What do you need? So things like that. I was really chuffed about that one. And they're going to be in a couple of books and in an encyclopedia about notions as well. This woman got in touch and she's doing this encyclopedia all about notions, and it looks like a really lovely book. Because when she got in touch, I'm thinking, is this a scam? Is this genuine? So I looked into it all, and actually her books are really gorgeous. So I'm really chuffed to be invited into that one. So yeah, so it kind of feels like an organic growth, yeah. I guess. Everything about my business has happened fairly organically, like meeting my production partners because I taught knitting, and that's a nice way to kind of grow your business, I think, because then you're not forcing, there's nothing. Yeah, it feels like the right way for me to do it, and
it fits with your life as well. Like if it's stuff that's organically happening, then that's sort of what's already happening in your life as well. So I think that's
yeah, it does take over, doesn't it? I mean, it's at the moment I'm working far too hard, so I kind of need to try and figure out how to reset that a wee bit, but not till the new year. So
get through the up to Christmas rush, and then we'll reevaluate in the new year.
Exactly. So.
Yeah, Emma from Studio 77 said that Esme made one of her colleagues' wedding dresses. That's amazing.
Oh,
imagine.
Cool. That's really cool. I'm going to look here as well. Yeah. Nice question. It's lovely to see so many people joining.
Yeah, so thank you very much.
Yeah.
If you've done a comment or a question, I think I'm going to wrap up this episode here now, but thank you so much for joining, Jen. It was such a great chat with you this evening.
You're welcome. Thanks for asking me.
Yeah, it was amazing. So tomorrow is the last in our week-long extravaganza. So I'm going to be talking to Matthew, who was on the series this year. So I'm sure that's going to be really good fun. So that's going to be 7 p.m. tomorrow. So I'll post a reminder to stories in a minute, and you can make sure to tune into that. And if you've missed any of my other Stash chats, they're on the Reels page or on our YouTube channel as well. But yeah, thanks everyone for joining, and thanks again, Jen. And I'll put a link to Generate if you need some things for your Christmas list.
Thank you, and happy birthday. It's a business birthday, isn't it?
Yeah, this is so you're almost done hearing about the Stash Hub first birthday. Like there's just a week left now. So yeah, there's only one more week of our half price sale as well. So then I won't be banging on about that anymore either. But yeah, it's been quite a crazy month. But hopefully you've all enjoyed the stuff that we've been doing. But yeah, hopefully I can convince Doug to get his wizard hat back on before the end of the month. But yeah, have a great rest of the evening, everyone.
Bye. Bye bye.